A colleague named Gulag Kulak, which might be nom de plume, I don't know, sent me a link to a very good view of the recent Iranian hypersonic missile attack against Israel. The video clip is playing on a loop here. The missile might be a Fatah 1 missile, which is produced by Iran and is advertised to fly between Mach 13 and 15. The video clip is interesting to me for two reasons. Firstly, because the plasma sheath is visible, which I mentioned in an earlier video about plasma sheath. And secondly, because there is an explosion just before the missile hits the ground. Now, the plasma sheath is the bright orange streak that appears just before the missile hits the ground. That streak is not the rocket motor. The rocket motor is at the back of the missile, and it's unlikely to be still running when the missile hits anyway. But the orange streak starts at the front of the missile and then extends quite a distance back. Anyway, so what's a plasma sheath? Well, missiles which fly above Mach 5 develop a plasma sheath around them. Above Mach 5, the air in front of the missile becomes so compressed and so heated. The missile is moving so fast, the air can't get out of the way, so it's fast enough, so it gets very hot. So hot that electrons become disassociated from their atomic nuclei. And this is arguably the defining characteristic of a metal. Electrons aren't bound to single atoms, so there's a kind of a sea of electrons freely moving and circulating among atomic nuclei. And that's why metals are conductive, and so is a plasma conductive. And as I said in an earlier video, because of this, a hypersonic missile that needs to hit a target that can move after the missile is fired, will require a seeker of some kind. And it could use either an RF or an IR seeker, or in principle, I suppose, a TV seeker. But the missile will have to slow down to below Mach 5 for that to work. And the reason is because the plasma is conductive, no microwave signal can get out of the radome or into the radome, because the plasma is like a metal. And since it's hot, about 5,000 degrees above Mach 5, an IR sensor will be blind. And this one didn't slow down, and in my opinion, it can't have an RF seeker or a seeker of any kind. But that makes sense also because this missile is intended to hit a ground target and evidently a power station. And Gulag pointed out something else that I hadn't seen before, and haven't heard anybody mention. If you step through the video clip, there is a definite explosion which occurs just before the missile hits the ground. And he suggested that maybe this is the missile shedding a ceramic radome in order to reduce its susceptibility to cross-pole jamming. And I think it's an interesting theory and thought process. But I don't think that's right, because the explosion happens so close to the ground that a jammer, if one were operating, cannot possibly change the flight trajectory of the missile after the explosion. And frankly, neither could a seeker help the missile hit the target that late if it had a seeker. I mean, imagine the energy required to change direction of that missile at Mach 13 and the number of G's it would have to pull. And in that video, that missile is going where it's pointed after the explosion. And in any case, I don't see an RF seeker being useful against a ground target in any case, because with the possible exception of an imaging RF seeker, but that's a different subject. I can see at least three possibilities to explain the pre-impact explosion. It could be that the missile malfunctioned, or the missile was by luck intercepted. But given the incredible timing of the explosion, these things seem unlikely. It seems much more likely to me that the designers have determined that the maximum destructive effect of a hypersonic missile happens if it detonates above the ground, in the same way that a nuclear bomb detonation above the target causes the greatest effect. And at this speed, the missile will arrive at the target first, followed by its blast wave, which seems to be visible in other videos. So to conclude, here's something else that to think about that I haven't heard any mentioned anywhere else. How detectable by radar is a missile which is basically covered in a metal sheath? What's the radar cross-section of a hypersonic missile with a plasma sheath around it? And from what angles is it most visible? And what does the radar return actually look like? Is it possible to determine the identity of a hypersonic missile at long range by looking at its radar reflection while it's got its plasma sheath on? Good enough to determine if it has a jammable seeker? I think these are to me interesting questions.